Now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Stephan Liozu. In addition to his role as Chief Value Officer at Thales Group, he is an adjunct professor and research fellow at Case Western University's Weatherhead School of Management, and also the author of several books, including Dollarizing Differentiation Value, Pricing Strategy Implementation, and his latest book, B2G Pricing, which will be one of our giveaways. So without further ado, Stephan, welcome.
Well, thanks, Nick. Appreciate it, the opportunity to discuss this topic, which is fairly new. I think most of the time we speak about value-based pricing in the context of products or services or transactional pricing. I wanted to elevate the discussion and really look at strategic projects, very large, complex bids, and in the context of maybe business to government pricing or B2B pricing with very large account. I think it requires probably everybody would agree, a different approach to managing the experience and the quantification of value. Okay, I hope you're all hearing me well. And by the way, Happy New Year for some of you that I haven't talked to. Happy New Year to everyone, and a good, healthy, and productive year. So when we discuss value-based pricing for large contracts, and the title was pretty long, and we put it together with Nick. I think it's essential to look at separate the two things in the title. Obviously, we all know that value-based pricing is a methodology, anywhere between 4 and 6 steps. This is typically the steps that are used on the left side. 6-step, understanding your competition, doing a segmentation, identifying the differentiators, quantifying them, estimating the value pool, and then pricing along with the other 2 C's, cost and competition. Now, when we discuss large contracts, or strategic bids, or we're starting to get into a different field. And as you can imagine, in Thales, we pursue thousands of very large opportunities around the world. So you get into the more of the strategic account and key account philosophy, very large pursuit, what we call the strategic pursuit. We have a capture process in place to go from A to Z, and sometimes this process can last 2 or 3 years. Imagine when you're bidding for the management of railways in the whole country, and you're pretty much going to operate this rail system for 35 years. It is a very large pursuit. So for that, you really have to take the time to look at the technical requirements, the customer needs, and all these good stuff. So it's a different vocabulary. We're talking about portfolio approach, book of business. And those could be global, very complex as far as the integration of software, hardware, and consulting and professional services, you name it. So I really wanted to set the context here, because that has a lot of implication for how you manage value-based pricing, and then how you manage customer value in general. Customer value is capture, quantification, and then creation. All these and need to be managed when you're pursuing very large contracts, which could be lasting for a long time, or could be very big in nature. So I'm going to go through a list of requirements in that context. What do you need to look at? What do you need to do in order to be successful? And then I'm going to show a few examples or options of very large projects, and share my experience on how you can manage value quantification and value management in general in these situations. So the first one, when you pursue very large contracts, and you work for an organization that it might be very large, or offering a very large portfolio of technologies or SKUs or products and services, at the end of the day, you have to know yourself very well, and you have to know the account even better, right? Because now imagine I'm selling to Boeing, and I'm going to sell software in the cockpit. I'm going to sell maybe an antenna for Wi-Fi. I'm going to sell parts in the engine. I'm going to sell on the ground maintenance. Many divisions in your organization could be selling these to Boeing or Airbus. But now you are putting together an account contract across multiple divisions of your organization, and then supporting maybe multiple businesses in the customer account, which means you really need to have a 360-degree of yourself knowing what you're doing, and then the account knowing what they want, right? So let's say you're bidding for maybe $1 billion of business or $500 million of business for a helicopter account, and then so you can't just go into one divisional approach, and traditionally the customers want one voice to them, which means for you as an account manager, as a pricing manager, or as a marketing manager, managing these potential contracts of this large opportunity, you have to network, inside and outside, to truly understand the customer needs. Then you have to discover what they truly want, what is the scope of the contract, what goes in and not and out of the contract. You need to connect the dots. You need to be able to stimulate discussions, so that you're really encompassing everything that needs to be in the contract, and then associating some of the things that you heard, some of the things that other people heard, and some of the things that's written, some of the things that is in the RFP. So as you can see, this is why right now one of the very popular functions in sales excellence and commercial excellence is the strategic account management function. And SAMs, or global account manager, GAMs or CAMs, are doing that work of preparing very large contracts for an account, whether it's 3 years, 2 year, 1 year, or 30 years, and then connecting all the dots. That's an essential requirement. So now you may have a very large strategic contract for one division, one account that may represent 50% of your business. I'm not saying it's all the contracts, but it also requires the deep knowledge of what the customer wants and what they're going to purchase. So that's number one. Number two, as you can imagine, you need deep customer intimacy, because now remember, we're talking potentially 1, 2, 3 big accounts. In the business to government world, you may have only one account, multiple agencies, but we're not looking at the traditional segmentation process where you're going to have many accounts in one segment, right? So you got to go deep in the account. So if you look at, for example, if you're selling into healthcare and you're going to sell into Siemens, or you're going to sell into Philips, those are very, very large accounts, right? So you're going to have to understand their end use, the value chain all the way to the end users, fully understand the RFP process and how do they go through the RFP process. Because some of the customers may be very professional buyers, others may be relationship buyers, where maybe it's a little bit informal, and understand truly their customer requirements. And we'll talk a lot of, when you look at RFPs, you have the formal requirements that are published, and you have the informal requirements. And both are equally important in how you're going to respond to it, right? We'll talk about minimal compliance on price and responding to the technical specs, but also influencing around the specs. So you need to map the buying center and understand the relevant influence levels. If you bid for a very strategic contract and you have 6 maybe departments involved in it, engineering, maintenance, procurement, you have to understand what they do, who decides, who the influences are, and really building an internal winning coalition. Now, we cannot only deal with procurement. The goal of procurement is only to deal with you in the buyer-supplier relationship. For you, your role is to have a relationship with other departments. Then you have to, obviously, in order to calculate the value and see what you're going to do with all your opportunities and all the things that you have in your contract, the pains, the gains, understanding the operational process of the customer, and then creating your value strategy for that specific large contract or bid, right? And then that will be framed within the RFP, right? So you're going to have requests for information, requests for quote, requests for proposals, and obviously that's going to guide how you're going to write your formal proposal. And this is why I started interacting with the APMP, Association of Professional Proposal Manager, because writing proposal is also very important, responding to the very large opportunities. So the role of the CAMs, what I call the AM, account management, is essential. And here we're talking about using the right methods, specifically for these very large account or pursuit, what I call very strategic pursuits. Now, the ecosystem mapping, who plays a role in the ecosystem? because you may have to force relationship to be part of a consortium, establish relationship with subcontractors. So you need to understand who does what, consultants, technology consultants, you name it. So understand the value chain analysis, the very good old-fashioned value chain analysis, all the way to the end user. What are pockets of values? How do you partner in the value chain? And then obviously, I would imagine that anybody who's on this webinar and responds to very large RFPs, they have a key account plan. They actually nurture that account through a CAP, which could be digitalized in CRM or in Excel or whatever it is. But you need to, this is where you gather all the nuggets of information about the account and the customer needs, the customer requirements, what we call customer hot buttons, and then that is the foundation of your response. Buying center, we mentioned stakeholder mapping is important. Who does what? Who reports to whom? Who is the power? And have a green, yellow, or red in supporting you and the bid. You'll find that maybe in large strategic opportunities, some internal stakeholders at the customer on the customer side may be against that specific technology that they selected, or rebidding of the process. So you really have to manage the political influences, and then setting the account priorities, understanding what the account wants, and then obviously understanding the total accessible market, the TAM, and the share of wallet. So these are techniques that are really far away from pricing, but at the end of the day, this is essential in order to understand the value and do a proposal that is going to respond very well to the customer requirement, the customer needs, and then establish the foundation around the total cost of ownership or the ROI calculations that you may have or you may be able to present, and then understanding what is going to be your positioning based on share of wallet. Because you're going to be more aggressive if you want a big share of wallet, or if you want a whole contract, or if you want to bid on your own versus bidding in a consortium. Number 4, before I said that number 4 this is one of my favorite quote, and I'm sure you will agree with this. Managing the pricing when the RFP is out is too late. Once the RFP is out, you're pretty much going to be compliant with what's in the RFP. So that you're missing the opportunity to influence, go around some of the stakeholders and shape the customer needs, influence on the value perceptions, establish the relationship between quality and price. And pretty much, if you don't do the value work 18 months or 12 months before that RFP comes out, then it's going to be pretty much a price discussion. And you're hoping that the customer is giving you good information about their evaluation criteria in the RFP, what's important to them, and it's clear. I can tell you that I've seen, I've been involved in many RFPs and bid must-win bids where the RFP is not very clear, and it's sometimes contradictory, and you don't know exactly what you have to do. So, in essence, you want to shape that up front before you go into the proposal writing and the calculations. So this is what we call left shifting, and this is what we use in Thales quite a bit, and that's requirement number 4. And the concept of left shifting is essentially anticipating, shaping, influencing as soon as you can. As soon as you hear that an account wants to kick out the incumbent, they're going to put the entire portfolio business for bid or for competition, or you have a strategic opportunity with B2G account, then you get to work. And this is where the account team get to work, and they anticipate customer needs, requirement, the scope of the potential opportunity, and then what's going to be in the RFP. How are they going to stage the RFP and the mindset going in? And then pretty much along the way, if it's a 2-year process or 1-year process or 6 months, you're going to shape the customer needs, right? And try to influence as much as possible. And that is going to feed the capture process, right? A capture process is a formal process that will take, 6 to 18 to 24 months, where you're going to go, start from scratch and all the way to the RFP proposal delivery, whatever the customer is asking the delivery in person, in an envelope, or whatever it is. And so you have to manage the account stakeholders, navigate the formal and informal needs, study the past of the account, how they behaved before when they put all the business back for renewal, and try to predict the future behavior, And then obviously internally conduct simulation, anticipate what the competition is going to do through black hat, the war gaming session, and this is worth the investment when if you're bidding for $20 million of business, or a big portion of your business, or a $1 billion opportunity, then you have to run black hat and war gaming sessions. So you can model the reaction of competition and see how you position yourself versus competition. And then in the value quantification area, you're constantly recalculating, iterating, simulating based on new information that you have. Maybe an incumbent is better positioned and you're finding information about them. Maybe another competitor is going to go in, that's going to change your value quantification, your TCO calculations. So pretty much along the capture process, you're going to research, iterate, repeat, simulate, model, research some more, iterate. And this is why typically there is a function called a capture leader, a capture manager, who's going to manage that specific very large opportunities through the RFP and orchestrate the team, the capture team, to be able to do all these activities. And again, you do this not when the RFP goes out. When the RFP goes out, it is too late. And chances are other competitors may have influenced the process. And essentially what happens there is you miss the boat on influencing the value, which means maybe a competitor shaped the RFP in their favor. That happens quite a bit. So another requirement when you to really be doing a great job at value-based pricing for these large opportunities is to really profiling for value and pricing information for the specific account or the specific bid, right? So and I've talked about the first four, but at the end, you really need to understand buying style, value, price, or poker player, the buying behavior. Are we in front of professional buyer, collegial, kamikaze, price buyer, crazy price buyer, or relationship buyer? You really need to understand the RFP evaluation philosophy. So, best value for money or low price compliance and minimum price compliance. So this is going to be essential on how you respond. Because if you have a price buyer in front of you and they have a large opportunity and the RFP is price, it's going to be very difficult to establish the perceptions of value and to do the left shifting that I just mentioned. So in essence, you really have to be compliant, not only on the engineering side, on giving the customer the bare minimum they require, and then matching the price on that, which has implication on the cost side. You cannot over-design your technology. So, and at the end, it is essential to anticipate if the account is, which philosophy for value calculation and quantification they typically use. TCO, total benefit of opportunity, total cost of ownership, ROI, or just a plain customer value model. So in Thales, I ask these to be profiled for every very large contract in anticipation of the RFP, and that goes in the left shifting document that we have. We have a template for left shift, and it's essential to know what you're going in and in preparation for the RFP and understand what you can influence and what is going to be pure play in pricing. So in essence, you could see now you have a very large book of business, a very large opportunity, and it's very complex. And essentially, the complexity is when you will go into value quantification is to go from all that complexity to one number, a simple number that, when you write the executive summary of your offer, your proposal, you're going to have a one number of, we're going to save you $10 million over the next 10 years when you work with us, right? So obviously there's going to be a lot of value simulation behind it, and maybe you have different categories of value numbers you want to show, but at the end of the day, one of the things that's very usually when you write a story and you write a proposal for a very large contract, it has to be simple, it has to be based on the key differentiators and the overall value you're going to deliver for them. And when I interact with the proposal managers, essentially I'm asking them to write a story with a value number. So let's look at some of the situation we may have as far as getting into the value-based pricing of these large opportunities through RFP, and then essentially doing some value management and keep in mind the 6 steps of value-based pricing, which we talked about at the very beginning, right? Because the steps are applied. Value-based pricing is a methodology, and whether it's B2C, B2B, B2G, or B2 defense, or direct to consumer, the methodology doesn't change. And you may do different steps differently. You may have different intensity at different steps, but at the end of the day, you need to understand your customer. You need to understand your competition. You need to understand what makes you unique, calculate the value of that uniqueness, and then decide how you're going to use that into your price setting, right? So the first one that we do quite a bit in the B2G world is, complex offers, very large systems. So just to give you an example, we in Thales, we do sell to a lot of defense agencies, and we sell very complex systems in radars and satellites and other naval ships, which could have up to 25, 30, 40 components, individual components. Some of these components are sourced outside and integrated in our system, and that is the role of a pure integrator, right? When you actually you buy some, you make some, and at the end of the day, you create the system. So it is essential to understand, as you see in these 5 steps right here, that there are customer dynamics that are different, right? You have to understand who the competition is. Again, direct competition, direct competitors that are going to offer the whole system, but other competitors that may offer partial systems, or may join a consortium to offer, some, of the system parts. But when you get into the third step, is really you have to understand and isolate the components of the system, and then you go into tangible components, which are physical products, hardware, equipment, cables, sensors, and other servers, and also the intangible ones. And intangible, usually we put that services, consulting, design, but it's not done when when you do the components. At the end, you do the analysis on the components, and you can imagine the complexity of doing multiple EVEs. This is why you need a software to do this. At some point, you also need to value model the value of integrated system, and sometimes the value itself is in the integration and not in the components. So it can be a long process. It can be quite demanding. You will do multiple value models for multiple components, but at the end of the day, don't forget to do the quantification of value for what I call the secret sauce, the glue of the system. And the glue of the system is design, testing, quality, maybe some cybersecurity, some implementation, execution, simulation, things that traditionally we have a tendency to give away for free as part of the product, but I'm trying to isolate them and really calculate the value of that integration component, right? So some of them might be in professional services, but at the end, the truly intangible, you need to isolate them and calculate that value. And that may be more than a tiebreaker at the end of the day in you being able to win that bid. Now, it's essential that you study the RFP and look at how the customer is actually asking you to respond to the bid. Do they ask you to do a la carte with all the components evaluated and priced one by one, plus maybe a bucket on services and software, or is it all inclusive, or do we separate integration and components? So you're going to have to study that very carefully and see how that impacts your internal analysis, right? So we've done this multiple times in Thales. We actually had an initiative on, just on the, the value-based pricing on complex systems with a multi-functional team, a multi-divisional team that, we need to establish best practices for this, because, you don't want to give away the secret sauce for free. And for free means you never get it back. And when you do a large contract that could be in a $500 million or $1 billion or 30 years long, you want to make sure the price is right at the beginning. So when you look at pure business to government pricing, and that's a topic of the book that I just launched last summer, because I think there was a gap in, really, the key question, can you do value-based pricing in the business to government world and the business to defense world? And the answer is yes, you could do it, right? You may call it something else. You may tie in with an existing process or the capture process, but the answer is definitely yes. And that's what, a section of the book is about. How do you do that and what's different? So in the business to government world, we talk about the capture process. I mentioned that So there are multiple companies that have different ways of doing capture management. We use Shipley, and Shipley, is well ingrained in the process of the Thales Corporation. And we use what's called the Shipley approach on discriminators, which I call in value-based pricing differentiators, right? And really, pretty much, if you look at the right visual right here, is really the discriminators are the differentiators that are truly valuable to the customer. So the difference is, a differentiator may be a differentiator, but not that valuable. It may not bring that much financial value for the customer. It may be maybe a must-have, but as far as economic value, not much. So in the business to government world, we use the word more like discriminators, because they have a true economic impact at the customer location. And really, you're the only one who can do it. So in essence, the concept of differentiation or discrimination is pretty much the same, right? I get into a lot of arguments, as you can imagine. Now, in the business to government world, we use the price to win concept. The price to win concept, and I show here a summary of which is price to win window to price. And pretty much you see you have to know the customer budget, the acceptable budget, the maximum budget, addressable budget, minimum credible budget. And all the customer needs and all the customer hot buttons and the customer requirements, which are not here. But then you're gonna, you could see the exchange between price and capabilities. And capabilities pretty much are a combination of cost and competition. So one of the issue with price to win is it really doesn't address the true concept of value. So you have to add that sometimes on top of the price to win analysis. And this is what in Thales we call position to win, and other companies call that position to win, which is the differentiation, which is and the calculation of value added to the price to win. So pretty much your capabilities is me versus competition. I'm going to look at what they're going to do versus me. We're going to do a cost of their capabilities, and then we're going to pretty much position on that map their price versus what they offer and their capabilities versus what I'm going to do, right? And you have, you set up the price to win in the yellow box, which is within the budget, so what the customers are looking for, the RFP, which is the requirements that they list in the RFP. So you're going to do simulations and see what's your best opportunity to win this bid or this capture opportunity, and really go through a very deep analysis of the competition, their cost structure, and their capabilities. What's missing to a certain extent is the concept of differentiation, especially when you get into the intangibles. Some of the things that I mentioned before, integrated systems and relationships and trust, and so. But it's a very powerful technique, which you need to complete with components of value. For very large commercial contracts, then outside of the B2G world, there is a lot of homework to be done, right? And typically you would have your account team with the account manager working with finance and supply chain, and pretty much a team that's going to be really working at bidding that specific very large contract, global contract or not. And then looking at the RFP and what the customer included in the scope to be up for bid, right? So you need to look at the portfolio, what they are looking to purchase, which could be products, services, technologies, you name it, right? And then you start developing a simulator with all the overall units, the value in actually dollars with either the former price or the new price that you're going to propose, and then the support intensity to fulfill the contract within the RFP. So don't forget to look at cost of servicing of these contracts, obviously, and all the things that will be required in the supply chain. This is why supply chain needs to be involved in the team. Then you're going to address all the inventory of these components, make sure it's complete in response to the RFP and the scope of products that they ask you to bid for. And then I would say you need to look at all the EVE models that you can do specifically on the products and services, and maybe some corporate services. What makes you unique as far as responding to that very large contract? You may be the incumbent, or you may be bidding against an incumbent. So you need to understand that. So in that case, the next best NBCA, next best competitive alternative, is going to be the incumbent or someone else that may bid for it. And then at the end, you need to come up with a value number. So the key here is how much, how many of the products have to be dollarized, quantified. They may be done already. You need to refresh it, and maybe you're introducing the contract new technology. So it requires a bit of orchestration from the pricing manager to look at, what's done, what's not done. And at the end of the day, you will end up with, okay, that bid is worth $38 million, right? We offering, all these SKUs and all these services, 50% are differentiated, 50% are more commoditized, I would say. And then you need to come up with a value number based on our proposal with all the service intensity behind it. It's a value of $5 million versus competition, right? So then you will look at your pricing structure based on how much of that value pool you want to, calculate, you want to capture. Now, if you have don't forget that there are systems that can do that for you. If you have already a price optimization software, or your CPQ, or very advanced software, that's going to be downloaded from there, and you're going to build your so your simulator with this. But don't forget that the EVE needs to be done as well, because sometimes in price optimization or whatever is in your system, it's cost plus or cost based and maybe not enough value driven. So it's going to be a combination of the two. The essential part here is it needs a team, it needs a process, it needs a simulator, and it needs to be done in the context of, okay, I'm going to be either as an incumbent, as a non-incumbent, and then look at, maybe run a price to win. We do price to win for non-B2G, non-large pursuit commercial contracts, and see how you position your offer and how strategic this is for you and your business. So, and generally speaking, if there are not contract to be discussed, or if it's not formed as part of an RFP, and that happens a lot too. Some customers are just doing renewals, or they place orders, they buy from you outside of a strategic contract. So, for that is make sure value-based pricing is adopted and is used. It's ingrained in the culture, and again, it's outside of a contract. And then you got to do systematic value modeling of product and services, found the ones that are very differentiated, the services that bring a lot of value, and then go through the process of monetizing, quantifying the value. And at some point is, you're going to be into a mode of more ongoing value selling, value communication once you've done that work, because at the end you have maybe a differentiation strategy at the corporate level, or at the divisional level, or at the product level. So in essence, it becomes part of a routine value-based pricing exercise that will, focus on value selling and managing your tactics on your transaction in the context of that, the premium that you want to capture and the value pool distribution. Don't forget the focus on value realization, which is very important, that you need to document the value you deliver so that you can be in a better position to renew the relationship. So I'm a big proponent of having the right system to calculate the value once if you win the contract. It's a contract for 2 years, or if you have a relationship and you have transactions, you constantly promote the actual realized value of the contract or the transactions. So, and that's essential. I can't say it enough. Value is only realized and perceived when you've shown to the customer that it is realized and they agree on it. So, and in essence, the day you sign that contract, the day you win that bid, that strategic pursuit, you actually start documenting as an ongoing mindset, and you have to use some of the tools that are available out there to make sure that you document the value that's delivered. Because again, these contracts are very strategic for your organization, right? And if you win $1 billion contract for the Air Force, for example, then it's going to be a window to the world that you won that contract. But also you want to make sure that the next contract that comes, because the government contracts are part of very large budgets, you want to win your fair share. But if you can show that you've documented your value and you realize the value and they actually see it, then you're better positioned to influence the RFP for the next bid, because they believe you more than just saying, I saved you money. And for that, I propose 7 techniques right here. A customer value file, I mentioned that before, which is a file that you send every quarter to your strategic account or strategic distributors based on the relationship that you just signed, the long-term contract, the global contract, and you document quarterly what you're doing for them and how much value it brings to them. How much of these very differentiated products they bought and how much value you deliver to them through the performance improvement. You could do value audit, right? And that's a value audit process. It can be included in the contract where you have a random, audits to calculate the impact of all the deployment of that contract and the installation of that technology. Or this is done very much into the IT world when you outsourced, or to a third party or IT, and then you're going to validate the savings and make sure that you pay the right price. Very formal, part of Six Sigma. So that's joint Six Sigma projects are great to quantify the value once the projects are in control mode for 6 months. You can extend the control mode to a year, but it's an essential, joint program that black belt to black belt or lean manufacturing expert to lean manufacturing expert, you agree there were savings. So you could do a joint value task force with some customer stakeholders and agree on the definitions, like a value council, but joint. You could establish a value scorecard based on that, which will be a visual like you have here on the right. You could do a risk sharing framework if you have a bit of skin in the game for, in the contract that you signed. And then there are tools out there that you can use to actually document that automatically. Value management is becoming a category that's more and more, I would say, moving to technology and well accepted as a category. So definitely check them out because it's a way to go, especially for very large contracts. So if I summarize the key considerations here that we went through, we talked about some requirements, we talked about 4 situations. I didn't mention I was going to put a 5th category for the situations around innovation. You have a very large strategic disruptive innovation you want to introduce to the world, and you work jointly with some customers and you shape the RFP. They might still have to go out with an RFP, but you're so embedded in the process that the chances of you winning is very high. And that's a particular way of calculating value and managing value-based pricing when you co-develop. And for example, large customers will pay for some of the R&D, which is really a switching cost. So I didn't want to put that in a presentation, but keep that in mind. RFP for disruptive innovation and new to the world stuff in the digital world is very important, right? So I have 8 considerations here to conclude my presentations today. So number 1 is definitely when you discuss large contracts, a complex RFP process or large pursuit, you need to have a progressive selling methodologies. So you can't improvise. You have to have tools, techniques, process, the account management process, define an account team in place with the right tool, the key account plan, defined. And if it's not in place, then I would recommend that you start with this. If you have a first very large contract, global contracts that you sign, it cannot be, fragmented or some people going in and out. These customers are going to do a very good job at evaluating your contract through the RFP, and it's essential that it's a very formal process. Number 2, improve your account intimacy. Try to get to the RFP a year before it comes out, shape, anticipate, understand the account, the dynamics, the requirements, the needs, the value drivers, and do that as soon as possible through a left shifting approach. The more you anticipate, shape, influence the RFP, the better you are in a position to win it, right? And not, think about not only you doing this, but your competitors are doing this, right? Because they do also have account teams and influencing influencers and marketing programs. So if you're the only one not doing it, then you're winning, you're not winning the communication war, I would say, and then someone else is going into the mind of the customer. So you may have a capture process, which is in place. Many companies in the B2G world and very large, like in the power and energy and utility world in B2B, they have strategic capture process. It is a process. If you want to learn more, you could just check out the APMP or Shipley Associates or others. and there's many publications on the topic. So systematically used value quantification tools. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of tools and software like the leverage point software that we use in Thales. But it's essential to have a standard way and systematic way of calculating value so that every team doesn't improvise and have their own way. And now you could do an ROI calculation. You could do, in the leverage point software, you could do a TCO approach. You could do a value model, traditional staircase model. But at the end of the day, it's the tool is not the answer to everything. But when you have many teams doing it and it's part of your process, you need to have a tool to make sure it's done consistently and systematically using the right approach. Number 6 is really to combine, a little bit of all these approaches. Price to win is important. It's an interesting approach because it really, it helps you validate, model the competition costs. Value-based pricing, as you know, and position to win will look at, more what I just said, plus, some of the value components. And then portfolio pricing at the end is, now you have a portfolio with 1,000 SKUs, and how do you price that portfolio of business for the account? So how do you share the value pool? Do you give the commodity products at zero margin and you price high on the services? So this is strategic pricing, sometimes global pricing, but for sure when you get into strategic account management, you have to look at portfolio pricing. Focus on value realization. I mentioned that many times before. It's essential, especially if you become the incumbent and 3 years from now, you're going to be the one being attacked by competition. Then you need to document. So you make your case easier 5 years from now. And then remember that value management is a team sport. You can't do that on your own. A pricing manager needs help. A marketing manager needs help. Supply chain needs to be involved. Finance. So, to really improve your excellence in the capture process through RFP, I think definitely setting up teams and working diligently using the right tools is going to be the way to go. So that's my presentation today. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you have not already. More information on my website, but I thank you for the attention, and I'm going to give the floor back to Nick.
Thank you, Stephan. That was great. So we've had a few questions come in during the webinar, and there's still plenty of time to enter them by using the right-hand panel on your screen. While you're entering, just a quick reminder to take the exit survey. You'll be entered into the raffle to win a copy of Stephan's latest book, Beating Cheap Pricing. And before we go into the Q&A, just a few quick words on leverage point. So are you selling value? Are your competitors selling value? Stephan just explored the ways that a strong value pricing and communication strategy is key to navigating the procurement process for large B2B and B2G sales. Here at Leverage Point, we offer a SaaS solution that creates interactive digital value propositions that help sales teams convey this value messaging in a more powerful, customer-specific way. How does it work? Well, first, product marketing and pricing team members build custom branded value models and messages to create a value proposition to help sales tell a story. They then publish that value proposition into a cloud-based library that is accessible by every reputable organization to customize in real time for each customer's and prospect's needs. Finally, beginning with the very first sales call, sales teams can modify the customer's baseline data in real time in order to create a unique business case to buy that the prospect can leverage internally to drive the deal forward. Early in the sales process, value propositions are really useful as flexible case studies for call prep, in sales, building sales confidence, and qualifying opportunities, and just engaging with your customer executives. Towards the middle of the sales process, these value propositions provide customer value analyses that serve as a consultative selling tool to address pre-sales challenges. And then as you move along to the purchase stage, the value proposition then becomes a shared business case to buy, collaboratively agreed upon between sales executives and their customer sponsors. This serves as a buyer's internal financial justification to purchase, and also, a sales team's asset and price negotiations. So who wins? Well, leverage points and value proposition and leverage point can be connected to a Salesforce opportunity, downloaded to a PDF or PowerPoint at any time for personalized leave behind. And on average, our clients achieve 5 to 15% higher close rates and 5 to 25% higher prices when using leverage point value propositions. So if you found any of that interesting, just let us know in the post-webinar survey, and we can reach out and schedule a demo for you. and your team. So yes, the webinar is going to be recorded. Yes, we'll email it to you. We typically get that out within the first couple business days. Stephan, I think this is an interesting one. What are the most common missing data points when trying to construct an EVE model for B2B or B2G, an RFP?
Well, I think generally speaking, the value of intangibles and understand the value of these intangibles is generally speaking not well done or not including often. And this is where, when I do EVEs, I'll ask teams to brainstorm on tangible physical differentiators and intangible and force them to put them in there. And frankly, at the end, it's another type of calculations and evaluation, and it's not very well done. So there is a need for more, I would say, knowledge around that. But it's often ignored, and that's a shame, because in a lot of time these are the true differentiators are around relationships, established case studies, or longevity, or so. They always end up non-quantified and as a nice to have at the end. And by the way, you can trust us, which means nothing, because trust can be calculated. So I'm pretty big on asking teams to evaluate the value, to quantify the value of intangibles. Sometimes also, where teams struggle to evaluate the risk side of some value drivers, where you reduce, the probability of accidents or disruption, interruption, and they don't have these. They're lacking the information to really calculate the formula. But it's like anything else. It's a muscles that you have to train and develop, and you have to have the right data, and it takes a little bit of time.
Makes sense. This one is an interesting one. So what is your recommendation for supplier to the bidder RFP, the supplier to the bidder to RFP to secure value for their part, especially if the supplier does not have access to the RFP?
So if you're a subcontractor or a sub-supplier, I'm not sure I'm clear on the question.
So this would be for a supplier to the bidder. So if you're, I think it's a subcontractor. So if you're supplying the bidder that's bidding on the RFP. Yeah,
and this is tough. And I've done quite a bit of projects in Thales about, when you join a consortium, you have the end user, which, that sets the RFP and establish the RFP, but you're actually going to quote to the consortium, and then you're going to make sure you convince them that your premium is essential in the consortium response. But then the consortium, the project manager or the finance person in the consortium is going to say, well, if I give you that much premium, I got to take it from somewhere else, because I have to respond to the RFP, and pricing is important. So you're going to have to do a little bit of gymnastics to go influence the end user, make sure your brand, your technology is in there. At the same time, not upset the consortium, itself. Make sure that you do your value models for the consortium, but also for the end user. And then you have a fight internally in the consortium to make sure that they accept some of the premium that you put in there. So it's a kind of a value sharing, because you actually at the end got to make the offer to the RFP much better if they take your technology. So it's not, I've done multiple sessions where we do value propositions, we understand the consumption needs, but the end user, map the ecosystem and all the things that I mentioned here, and then we do multiple value models for multiple players within the ecosystem. Great.
So how can you use technology to optimize value-based pricing with these large contracts?
Well, I think it's essential. As I said, if you're the incumbent and you're already selling to the account, you're going to have your pricing data, transaction data, so you're going to use your BI tool, you're going to use your price optimization or price, transactional software, ERP or not, and that's going to be the base. If you're not the incumbent, you're going to have to obviously come up with some simulators. So you could always do that manually in Excel for sure, but I would definitely leverage technology. And when you get into, if you're bidding for a very large contract and you have to do 100 value models, and you have multiple teams working on them, and I've done that many times with very complex number of teams working on different components. Frankly, you have to have a software like Leverage Point to manage all that stuff, because at the end you could aggregate all these value model into one master value model for the system, and that's essential. And they all look alike, They all branded the same. They all have the same way to calculate the formula. What you don't want to have is introduce error in the formula or manual, calculation error because someone is using Excel a different way. So be aware of this.
Makes sense. Yes, we do see that a lot. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, if you have a pretty good idea of who your competitors are, but don't know the prices they're quoting, can you use value to keep from leaving money on the table?
Well, you have to. So there's in the B2G world, the price to win requires you to know what's called the price to compete, which is the behavior, the pricing behavior of your competitors on all the past bids, and you got to find a way to get them right. So I know it's in B2G, a lot of the prices are published because you could ask the government for information. They have public websites where you could actually go see the price that because it's a disclosure of public information. It's much more complicated in B2B, and we get into the competitive intelligence field where you have to do pricing research and through distributors, or you could hire consultants to do pricing research from you, which is really going to try to find out the price levels. But it's an essential part of value-based pricing and price to win. So you can't navigate blind and then expect to put a proposal in front of the customers, not anticipating where the competition is going. And frankly, we've lost a few strategic contracts in my time, in Thales and with other clients before, where we underestimated the behavior of some of the competitors. And remember that you're winning a very large contract, you're taking it away from competition. They may be very aggressive on the next one. So you have to understand these games. This is why we run war game sessions and black hat sessions. Black hat being, putting your teams in simulation, wearing the competitor's hat. How are they going to react? What are they going to do? And I do that day in, day out. We do a lot of black hat session. I'm a certified coach in war gaming, and it's part of value-based pricing because you need to understand how competition is going to position themselves.
It makes sense. Sorry, can you still go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Didn't want to jump in there. So are there any best practices unique to B2G as opposed to B2B?
Oh, yeah. And it's a chapter in the book, the difference between B2B and B2G. Again, we use the same methodology, the 6 steps, and segmentation is not the same because, again, you're selling to the Department of Defense. There's only one. There's not 500 to segment, right? So you go deeper in the segmentation. We talked about finding competitors' price. It's going to be different in B2G versus B2B. How you dollarize and quantify value is different. I've been in many situations where, it was very hard to dollarize. Imagine you have a pilot in the fighter jet and we're using laser-guided missiles, and you can gain 5 seconds or 2 seconds reaction for a pilot. How do you monetize and dollarize this? And so we were stuck many times because you have to then create your own testing methodology, and it's not something that's done in the defense world. It's more done in the B2B world. So there's a lot of differences, nuances. The philosophy remains the same, but it requires a deep understanding of the government and federal environment, because you just don't dollarize and quantify value the same way. So there's a whole book in the chapter in the book around dollarizing in the B2G world.
Great. And quick reminder, if you take the survey, we're going to be giving one copy of the book away. So make sure to do that after the session. So a couple questions on the left shift terminology. So, where does it come from? Just to help folks remember it.
It's so, if you do a search on Google document, you'll find it comes from the IT world where you're, understanding, the customer needs, and a lot of that stuff comes from the IT because IT is always ahead of the game as far as outsourcing, TCO, and left shifting. So, but you'll find that on we embraced that in Thales, and we called it left shift because you have to go very, very in the upfront process, to understand the customer requirements and shape them and influence them if you can. Yeah, right. So it doesn't work all the time, but at least there is an obligation of making the effort to shape and influence and understand So, and frankly, with price buyers, sometimes it's impossible, and sometimes you gotta submit confidential price in an envelope that's sealed. The supplier's name is not known, and you can't win all the time. Sometimes you have a best value contract, sometimes you have a price. So it's
Yep.
you left shit when you can.
Yep, and that's my background too. So that's you nailed that one. So in large global RFPs where there's unique crises across markets, and I think the example given is, say, med device, how do you support using value propositions in this context?
Well, so yeah, I mean, value proposition, it depends who's in front of you, who you're bidding for. You're a global player and you have a global customer, then you're going to have to look at the footprint of the customer and the stakeholders, and you're going to have to do multiple value proposition. And that's a really tricky situation where you're going to have local culture, local health systems, regulations. You're going to have pricing preferences, local competition. So all that stuff, it's going to be making your value modeling very dynamic. But it's a matter of understanding the account, what they want to buy, how much they want to buy, where are locations, and then looking at that scoping, what I mentioned, what are the boundaries of the contract, and what is the scope, and then going in an action mode to do your best to simulate the best you can. And it's tricky. I mean, frankly, when you get into global suppliers selling to global customers in a very competitive sector like medtech with lots of regulation, I mean, this is as complex as it can be.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more. So let's go with, I think this is a good one to end it. So documenting value as an incumbent is vital, but it's often really difficult. How do you recommend doing so?
So use some of the techniques. If you can get the customer on board, even better. If you cannot, you have to do it the best you can. I think for me, I don't take no for an answer. We just have to document it the best we can, with the best accuracy that we can, and then we have to constantly interact with the customer so you don't do this, and you sign a contract, then you disappear for 3 years, and then 3 years later you go to renew it and you show the documentation of value. No, you do that every month. This is a part of ongoing value selling. You do that through regular touch points. You have regular value meetings. Even if the customer are upset about it, they don't want to talk about it, you have to kind of train them, educate them to be on the receiving end of value documentation. If not, it's going to come out of left field and it's not going to be very credible. So even, the customer may not want to document and share with you how much value they've realized, but at least having discussions. And don't forget that a customer is multiple stakeholders. So you have to engage with the multiple stakeholders. And that's an essential part for me, for large, when you talk about subscription, when you talk about global contracts, you talk about large pursuits, you sign and then you think immediately in terms of retention. And part of retention is value documentation and value realization.
That's absolutely true, and I think that's a great place to wrap up for today. So before you go, just a quick reminder to register for next month's webinar during the exit survey. We're going to be joined by Tim Smith, who's going to be doing a fun practical session on value-based pricing. He's going to be sharing tips on how to implement a more profitable pricing strategy starting on day one as a pricing leader. So we're always excited to see Tim, so make sure you pre-register in the survey. And that'll be it for us today. So big thank you to Stephan for joining us. And thanks to everyone for taking the time out there today to join us. And from all of us here at Leverage Point, have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.